evening, everyone.
Hello.
And welcome to the stream. So this is season 4, episode 9 of Inside the Rookery. And today we are joined by Henry Lopez to talk about living campaigns. Hi, Henry. Welcome to the stream.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Lizzie. Pleasure to see all of you.
It's a pleasure. We have had people submit comments, as always, in the Discord community and our patrons. So we've got some pre-submitted questions for you, Henry, which we will get to. And as always, everyone in the chat who's watching live can post comments there, and I will bring them up on screen, and we can ask Henry those comments as we go along. And if you're watching on the replay, then join us live another time for another episode of Inside the Rookery. And please like, share, subscribe, and do all those things that people do. Henry, welcome to the stream. Would you like to give us a quick introduction?
Surely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. My name is Henry Lopez. I am, I've been playing RPGs since the 1970s when I was a wee lad, as you guys see over there. And I love telling stories. I've always been a natural storyteller. And role-playing games was a natural attraction for me. I started telling my own stories, GMing almost very, very early on, creating my own worlds and whatnot. When the D20 boom started, I guess, when it was open to all of us, the OGL and whatnot, we decided to jump in with Arcanis, the World of the Shattered Empires. We were obviously a very, very small company. There were only 3 of us. We pulled together a few dollars, put it into a pool, and put out our very first product, which was a little 32-page adventure called Spear of the Logan. And we all decided that we weren't going to make this our full-time job, so anything we made will go back into the company to make bigger and better books and more books, obviously. So that's worked out for us fairly well. We've been doing this now for 22 years, 21 years, 22 years, give or take. And we've grown. Obviously, the not just for the Arcanis setting, but we also published at one point Witch Hunter: The Invisible World, which we sold off to another company at this point. We have Erotic Capes, the game of superheroes versus zombies and super zombies. We've done Tales of the Caliphate Knights, and a bunch of other things, including organized play. And the reason we started with organized play is because we had absolutely zero money for advertising. So we figured guerrilla advertising. We put out an organized play, and because of the philosophy of if they play it, they will buy it, that kind of thing. If they enjoy the game, they'll buy the core book. And it was an unspoken pact that we had with the players that if they will produce adventures for them to enjoy, and they will support us by purchasing our books. And it worked out fairly well. When 3rd edition was over, 4th edition was not a good fit for us. So we decided to do our own role-playing game called, we affectionately call it ARG, which is the Arcanis role-playing game. We won the Origins Award for Best Game of 2012, I believe it was. And it has a very, very strong following. But 5th edition came along. Everybody was very, very excited about that and wanted us to convert over to 5th edition. So we did not get rid of ARG. We still have ARG, but we also have Arcanis 5e, as we call it. And that's where we're at.
And Andy Leask has shared in the chat one of the maps Andy Law created for Henry's Arcanis setting. Which one was that, Andy?
It's the enormous map.
A
truly huge map of the Eternal City. It's a big one.
This is the book that came in.
Yeah, if you view it to anything smaller than poster size, it just looks like all the tiny details are tiny. It's a big map. Oh yeah, there it is.
Nice.
It is.
It's a big map. There's a lot going on in that one. Henry and I talked for ages about everything that we were going to include in that one. So yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right, let's get into the questions then. So there's a couple like this at the start. MCV asks, I think a living campaign is a persistent world shared between multiple groups, which can also encounter the effects other player groups have had on the world. Is that correct? And Lazy Cat has asked, what is a living campaign? And what is the point of a living campaign?
I have no idea. No, just joking. All right. So the point of a living campaign, as well as let me answer the last two. What is a living campaign, and what is the point of a living campaign? Living campaign, which is also known as organized play, is it's usually either a company sponsors it, or a small group of players that get together and they wish to share their world with other players. What they do is they usually put out some sort of document, which we call the campaign document, which tells you how to create characters. Obviously, ever since the early days, way back when of the RPGA, when it first started doing organized play, to make things fair, to make sure it was playing on a level playing field, you were not allowed to roll up a character. You had X amount of points, and you had to divvy up those points into the 6 stats and go from there. That way, no one was cheating and saying, "Hey, I have 5 18s and a 17." My rolls were amazing, that kind of thing. So it started with a level playing field, and the advantage of doing that, well, actually, let me back up. So it started with what were now called classics or one shots, and that is an adventure where you were given 5 or 6 pre-generated characters that were specifically tailored for that adventure. So I remember one that I played back in like 1982 or whatever. We were all gnomes.
Hey,
exactly. All of us were gnomes, and it was a gnome centric thing, and we played that. And basically, it's a one shot. You play that character, and much like a Call of Cthulhu adventure, you either win and say no, you died or you succeeded, but it doesn't matter because there's no advancement. There is no second adventure, right? You just play it and you're done. So then the living campaign evolved from that because people wanted to see what happens with their character. So the advantage or the point is that, Andy and Lindsay are across the pond from me, but they're playing Living Arcane. So they create their characters based upon our rules, and they play over there. But they come over for Gen Con, and they bring their Living Arcanist characters, and they are able to immediately slot into any Living Arcanist event because the rules are all the same. You can take the character from any campaign and bring them into, from any adventure in the campaign and bring it into another adventure in the campaign, right? So if you're playing in England, you're playing in Canada, we have a huge group in Australia, which we love. And it doesn't matter where you are, you can play at any table of Arcanis. And that's the advantage. That's the point. The point is that sometimes people just don't have 5 people to play with, and before the advent of Zoom and Twitch and all these other virtual tabletops, the only other option they had was to go to a convention to play because they had no one around. So obviously things are evolving now. We have VTTs, which actually is kind of cool because, like I mentioned, our Australian players, we have a very, very, very we call them Arcaniacs, very faithful Arcaniacs in Australia, and we're constantly on. And sometimes, American players will be, first thing in the morning on the Pacific, and they'll be at nighttime in Sydney or in Perth, and they'll be playing. They'll be playing together, and basically they'll be able to play with people which they had never had the opportunity to play with before the advent of this. And because of the beauty of a living campaign, there's no, we have to create new characters for this adventure. We have to do this. Are you, let me check your character, whatnot. No, we have a level playing field. We have the rule of honor, as we call it. No one's cheating. It's just a game. We're here to have fun. No one's making with the stats and whatnot. And it's been going great now for, like I said, 20 some odd years. I think we are the longest running single setting organized play campaign ever, as far as I know. We changed rules, obviously, as the game has evolved, but the setting and the story arcs have remained the same. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
And maybe just a follow-up question from Seagoat, who's asked, it sounds like a lot of work to set up and run / coordinate a living campaign. So why would I want to set up something like this?
Well, why would you want to set up something like this? I assume you mean your own organized play campaign, or do you mean run a campaign or run an adventure in an existing
in someone's organized play? Yeah.
So let me take those as a two-pronged question. The first one is why you would want to do this on your own, because you have some sort of mental illness, perhaps like me, or and you want to take on lots and lots and lots of work upon yourself, but it is very rewarding. No, seriously, if you have a burning desire to write adventures, if you think you have something unique that you can offer players across the globe, that is it's an itch that's not being scratched right now, then this might be the thing for you. Is it a lot of work? It is and it isn't. Setup really isn't a lot of work. You just set up the basic campaign document, which is the rules of the road. What are your rules? You have 30 points, you have 35 points, you have whatever it is, and obviously, unless you're really going all out and making up your own system and everything else, you're going to piggyback on either OGL, maybe Shane Hensley's Savage Worlds, or something else, or Call Cthulhu, or whatnot. Make sure you get permission first. And you're piggybacking on that. So really, there isn't a lot of work. You're just adapting those rules to organized play. Where the hard work comes is in what we call feeding the beast. There is never, ever, ever enough adventures to satisfy everyone. It's impossible. We have groups. Okay, let's say you think to yourself, all right, we'll be generous. We'll be generous with our time, and we'll write 2 adventures a month. 2 adventures a month. That's plenty. People play once every other week. They get together, play for 4 or 5 hours. Breeze, right? No. You could produce 40 adventures a month, and it would not be enough. So the problem is that if you become a victim of your own success, people will want more. Yeah. Now, it also means that if you're really lucky, people become enamored with your system and your campaign, and they wish to write for you. And then you got to figure out the whole ownership thing or whatever. But putting that aside, if they write for you, obviously now you have somebody else writing as well as yourself. Maybe if you're really lucky, you get 4 or 5 people. Well, then you're in pretty good shape. At our high point, we had must have been 18, 20 people writing, not every single month, but producing and producing and producing. And we had an abundance of adventures that we could give to players, and everybody had a great old time. So that's the biggest thing. Now, if you wish to participate in a living campaign or coordinate a living campaign, the way to do it, for example, we have Dan Melgar, who is in, I believe he's in Leeds. Leeds, is that correct? Okay. He's at a convention called Contingency, and he's running a bunch of Living Arcanis adventures. As a matter of fact, it's from what he told me, it's doing extremely well. People are very excited and are playing Living Arcanis right now. It is a convention, or I'm sorry, he's there with I believe 2 other GMs, Robert Silk and Richard. I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. Richard's there, and they're all there, running, and they're trading off. They're running multiple tables and whatnot. So if you want to participate in an existing organized play campaign, well, what you would do is you contact the organizer or the people who are heading it up. You say, hey, I want to run this at home if they permit home play, which we do, or I want to run it at a convention, which obviously we do as well. And as far as we're concerned, we vet you real quick, make sure that you're on the up and up, and boom, we send you an adventure or 2 to get you going. As a matter of fact, we have what's called an intro pack, which has 8 full written adventures. These aren't just outlines or whatnot. They're full adventures, PDFs, obviously, with what is it? There must be character sheets, the rules, the campaign documentation, a bunch of other things that we put in there. And it's up on drivethrurpg.com, and it's free. We have to put $1 on that because we can't put it for free because we have something else that's free and you're only allowed one thing. But it's a pay what you want. So it's free. People are taking it for nothing. And that gets you started. And that'll take you from 1st level to 4th level, I believe. And at least it gives you a flavor of what Arcanis is. So you don't even really need to contact us. You can just grab that and start running. And if it is your cup of tea, then you can contact us for the newer adventures and whatnot. So,
And Kilishandra's asked, like, how do you organize all those groups playing in the same campaign world? It seems impossible to track. And I think what they're kind of getting at is also what Dalinor asks, which is how do you record the impact of player decisions? Do you decide which to incorporate in future publications? So, what kind of impact can they have on the world?
Well, that is a great question and something I'm very proud of. From the get-go, we said what we didn't like about, well, we played in organized play campaigns prior to launching Living Arcanis. And we said, what don't we like? I don't like the fact that you play it and you have absolutely no impact at all in the world. You know, the world it's like a Star Trek episode. It's resets episode per episode. Everything's back to normal.
Yep.
You know? And we didn't like that. And so we figured out, well, first of all, we made a vow that said players decide, you know, I'll get the ball rolling, but players will decide what track or which track the campaign is going to take. And the way we do that, just from a logistic point of view, we do that in two different ways. If we are premiering adventures, for example, we used to go to Origins all the time until life got in the way. We would premiere an entire track and have 4 adventures and a battle interactive, which we'll get into in a minute if you like, and whatnot. And at the end of each adventure, we tally up what all the tables did. And we always go by majority rule. So if the majority ruled X instead of Y, then the follow-up adventures, not the ones that were written for that campaign, obviously, because they're already written, but any following adventures that are written, take that into account. And I have 2 great stories that if we have time, I'll tell you about how that happened. And the second way we do it is if we premiere adventures that are not in a campaign, we always have what we call the critical event sheet. And in the back of the critical event sheet, it says, did the adventurers do X or did they do Y? Was so-and-so, did so-and-so survive? Yes or no? You know, whatever. And then at the very end, anything else additional that you may want to tell us about. And then we allow players to obviously scan it and email it to us, or they can just mail it, you know, snail mail, whichever they want. We wait for 3 months. At the end of those 3 months, we take all that, we tally it up, and once again, majority rules. What happened? Did X live? Did X die? Did Y happen? Did Z happen? You know, and then we go from there. So, perfect examples. Okay. There was a soft point. Well, let me back up. All our adventures are split up into categories: hard points, soft points, and BIs, which are short for battle interactives. Okay. A hard point and a soft point, the difference is that you can play any soft point in any order. And it doesn't matter. They're kind of like one shots. They still, you know, weave in and out of the main story arc, but they can be played in any order. Hard points, obviously you can do whatever you want, but we strongly suggest that they're played in the numerical order that they're given. So they're hard point 1, hard point 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Because at the end of, we put all the hard points together, they form a story arc with a beginning, middle, and end. Some of our story arcs are extremely ambitious, like our very, very first one, which I had no idea what I was doing, and it ended up being 6 years in the making. You know, it lasted for 6 years, the Coriani Civil War. Or we have the one that we just did, which was the Crusade story arc, which was a 2-year story arc. So we have various. We have the Coming of the Destroyer story arc, which was about 2 years. And now I'm falling back into bad habits, and we're in the War of the Paragons, and we're in year 4. So we'll see how long that takes me to wrap up. But anyway, so in one of the first soft points that we did, we had a dwarf, and I just made up this dwarf, Elevak. Now, the thing about our dwarves is they're not like normal dwarves. None of the other character species are, with the exception of maybe humans. The dwarves were once celestial giants, and they were cursed by the god Elir for transgressing against humanity. And you want to lord over all. Now you should be shorter than lower than most. Elir is also the sun god, so they shy away from him. They live in underground and caves and whatnot. But we have, just as a little side, our religion is a pantheon, kind of like the Greek pantheon. Mm-hmm. So we have the god called Sarish, which kind of like the used car salesman of gods, and he says, "Tell you what I'm going to do. You make the perfect item, and I'll release the curse for that one enclave, because we have 7 different enclaves, which is different ethnicities, maybe nationalities of dwarves. They're not just monolithic. And that's the reason why they make magic items. That's why there's magic items in the world and whatnot. So this guy Elabak was a dwarf, and he was a weaponsmith, and he thought that he had he was very close, very, very close to figuring out how to make the perfect item. But he was extremely old, and he feared he was going to die before he perfected his technique. So he decides to travel to one of our nations called Canseri, where everything evil comes from Canseri, and bargain for unlife. And along the way, the players are there, protecting him, kind of like caravan guards kind of thing, but actually protecting him. The players have the opportunity to either convince him not to do it, or to convince him to do it. When I wrote Elabak, he was a throwaway character. It was just for this one adventure. That was it. Well, at the end of that, the majority of the players convinced Elabak not to turn in, to destroy his soul, basically, and become undead. And that character has then become a major character. It evolved into becoming a major character in the rest of the campaign. People love Elabak. He makes swords for them and whatnot. So he's a good old dwarf. And that was basically, I didn't plan that. That was given to me by the players. And whatnot.
I have to say that's quite a relief. When you were telling that story, and then you were like, and the players majority decided to. I was like, please say that they persuaded him. Oh, thank goodness, you've restored my faith in humanity.
Well, let me flip it then. So the second story. Okay, remember I said the dwarves were celestial giants? So the reason they got into this whole thing was the dwarves and dragons were having an epic battle, genocidal battle, and the celestial giants were losing. So they made a pact with the human pantheon, the gods of Lear, okay? Because at that point, the empire of man at that point had collapsed, right? And Lear said, "Tell you what, we'll help you with all these dragons. We'll take care of this. We'll make sure you win the war, that you're not destroyed, but you're to shepherd mankind until we can get back on their feet, and restore themselves to their former glory, blah, blah, blah." And that's what they did, right? So one of the, so fast forward thousands of years later, and there's a group of players that go into what's called the Fiendish Expanse, and they find an ancient celestial giant castle. And as soon as they get in, they hear what's almost like a heartbeat, I don't know if you can hear that, boom, 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 boom. And throughout the whole adventure, they're adventuring around, whatever. They finally find out that it is one of these dragons in a pillory that's been stuck there for thousands of years, and it's its tail banging against the wall that they're hearing that thump, thump. And one of the players decides to make a deal. And they decide, because that isn't the crux of the adventure, it's a side event, it's a side little quest thing. You can decide to release them, because you can, from your point, you can press some levers and whatnot, you can release the dragon. Or you can decide to leave them there. You can still continue the adventure and go to the finale. That doesn't matter. Well, as you can imagine, a lot of them did, and a lot of them didn't. Okay, when we tallied up all the critical event sheets, the release of the dragon was made, or the decision was made by one table. One extra table did it than all the others. The problem is that in that table was a Tultapetan dwarf. And that dragon, that celestial giant castle, was the Tultapetan's ancestors. While they were still, whatever. The dragon still knew when he was released. They made bargains. Hey, you're not going to kill us. You're not going to do anything else. No. Hey, here's what you wanted. A major deal. The dragon was honorable, right? Did everything, and then he set off. He found where the Tultapetans were, and he decimated that entire enclave. To this point, you can't play a Tultapetan dwarf without a special cert to be one of the few that are still alive. Nice. So the fact that player who was a Tultapetan basically, handed the keys to the dragon to, hey, destroy my people, and that's what the players decided. So that's what happened, and we continue with that. No matter what the consequences are, we continue. And I've got tons of stories like that. I don't want to take up too much of your people's time. Hope I didn't bore you guys with those long stories.
No, they were
Not at
great.
all.
No, that's
Seagoat
good.
says, yeah,
I was just
Sorry,
going
on
to
you go
say
on.
we've talked a lot about consequences in campaigns and how
Mhm.
important they are. It's all too easy to write things and then massive life, like world altering things happen, and then, like you say, the reset button. So it's nice to hear the long consequences and that element of personal tragedy. I wonder if that player is still playing the same character, haunted by the guilt of what they did.
You figure, right? You figure he
Yeah.
would be. That guy has never. We have had 2 players that have had a palpable impact on the campaign that we never heard from again. We don't know if they're still playing, and not because of what happened. They loved it. The guy was like, "Oh, I made an impact on our game," because we have a thing called "Leave your mark upon the Shattered Empires." That's kind of like our saying. And he left his mark upon the Shattered Empires, and
Yes, he did.
and I never heard from the poor guy. So if you're listening, please contact me, pcihenry@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you.
Zoltan says, I know several West Marches live in campaigns. You've got a pool of GM organizing games, and players can register when they can, and the GMs synchronize between them to keep everything up to date. And Seagoat appreciates the stories, so more stories, please. So, no, sorry, that's the wrong one. So Lady Phoenix says, how often do players change the direction you plan to take the story?
All the time.
Yay!
All right. So we used to do something called a LARP, which I'm sure you guys know what that is. All right. So at Origins was our big to do, right? At Origins, we had 4 brand new adventures, usually 3 hard points, a soft point, a LARP on Friday night, and then the big battle interactive, the BI on Saturday night, which is kind of like the capper to that mini story that we're telling at that convention. Well, at the LARP, we decided to do things a little bit differently. Okay. I'll be honest with you, and I hope I don't get pilloried here, but I had never been to a LARP before they asked me to write a LARP. So I asked around, and as you can, it's kind of like a person who doesn't know how to put together something, and they put something together. It's kind of like a LARP. Okay, so I heard that one of the biggest complaints about a LARP are that people who are shy are kind of like wallflowers. They're kind of like on the side, and the more boisterous, the more aggressive players are fighting for the spotlight, and these other players are kind of like on the side. I don't like that. I like for everybody to have a good time. If you're paying for a ticket, gosh darn it, I want you to have a good time. I want you to get involved. I want you to play. So I came up with this harebrained scheme of mine that we had X amount of NPCs, which were from the player base, and everybody was excited to do that. Each of them wanted 3 things, and there was a primary objective, a secondary and tertiary objective. And what they wanted was held by another NPC. But NPCs were not allowed to speak to each other. They had to go through intermediaries, which were the players. So at the beginning of the LARP, all the players were divvied up to all the NPCs. So there was never really a big group evenly as we could do. There's usually not more than 3 or 4 people. And because of that, everybody got to do something. Either you were out negotiating with different NPCs to get what they wanted, or you were playing major domo to your NPC, and then cutting deals for yourself, because this is Arcanis. So they're cutting deals for themselves, trying to out maneuver their patron for their benefit. And it's hilarious, the stuff that happens. So anyway, at the end of that, we decide, who got what they wanted. Did they get this? Did they get that? And as usual, we tally everything up, and then we have the big finale where I say, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Wars have begun and ended because of the LARPs. Not that I planned it, but that's what they negotiated. The weirdest things that they have cut deals that are outside of anything in the parameters of the adventure. They decided to cut these deals and whatnot. So let me tell you the biggest one. There is a family called the Valtenson family. And the Valtenson family is ripped into 2, right? Some are in one nation called the Koreani Empire, the other one of this other nation called Millendir. And they're always fighting. There's like a civil war between the family. And they found out that due to breaking of a vow, that their souls cannot continue on to the afterlife. So they're stuck. All these souls are stuck in this waiting room, the cauldron. It's actually outside the cauldron, and they can't move on. They're stuck, right? And one of the players made again, at a LARP that had nothing to do with this, made an impassioned plea to please, please, please put the family together, save all of the ancestors. The ancestors are suffering, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and the players, I gave them Herculean tasks to do to make this happen. And son of a gun, they did it. They actually pulled it off. So I went, great. That's what you want? And then I looked at them and I smiled and I went, thank you. And they got very, very scared, because what happened was, sure enough, the family got put together. There was a deal made. Territories were exchanged. The nation of Almeric started. And then the assassinations began. And the leader of one faction got knocked off. The leader of the other faction got knocked off. One blamed the other. And the internecine war started all over again, but even worse. It's kind of like the Germanic 30 Years' War. That's Almeric. And it was all thanks to, I had no plans to do that, but thanks to her. That's what I have. And people love it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lindsay.
When I first, when we were talking about having you on the stream, I was thinking back to some LARPing that we had done, and that the consistency from year to year. So the one that we went to was a yearly event, and so the things that had happened the year before obviously had an impact. But I always felt that there was quite a harsh distinction between things that were supposed to happen and NPCs were doing together, and things that you were just trying to do. So I really like that idea that the NPCs, there's a way that they have to constantly engage with the players. I think that makes for a much more enjoyable experience.
And one other thing, if I could just throw it in there, that made it so wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. Is that we had the same players showing up year after year after year. Now, not 100%, but most of them. And almost every one of the players who played an NPC came back. So Matthew Flynn came back year after year, and he was, at one point in one story arc, he was Ulshi Dao. In the D20 campaign, he was Haru Boss, and everybody would know him as that character. Chris Sanders was Emperor Calcestus. Hey, that's the Emperor, And they would tell me afterwards that as they walked around, people would address themselves as that. Hey, the Emperor's here and whatnot. And they had a blast. We had a blast. And that consistency that you were talking about, Lindsay, which I think is very important, we were able to continue that that illusion that these are those people, that these are these characters, continued. And it was great, because every time I had somebody say, hey, I'll be there, I'm like, okay, can you be Ulshi Dao again? Oh, yeah, I'll be Ulshi Dao. No problem. And that consistency continued. Now, again, it wasn't 100%, but we did what we could.
Grumpy Lizard says, love the beard, Henry.
Oh.
I've presumed Grumpy Lizard knows you, because they had then say Henry is the green moon made of cheese. It's made of warpstone. Everyone knows that.
Yeah. Grumpy Lizard, I think, is one of our Arcaniacs. The beard, actually, I'm not a fan, but Maria, which is my fiance, she loves it. So that time for one quick little story?
Of course.
All right. I was born here in the United States. My parents are Cuban, so we have Spanish sayings, right? Or Spanish stories. My grandfather one day took me aside when I was about 15 years old, and he said, "Son, grandson, you will one day meet a woman who will mean the world to you. Her very presence will bring light into your life, and she will make your days brilliant. But that same woman one day will ask you to jump out of a window. So you better pray you're on the first floor, because one way or another, you're going out that window." So this is first floor. She wants this. Like, okay, honey, you got it.
Before we get to greatest memory, let's go to what has gone wrong when running your living campaign. So what are the bad stories?
The bad stories in the story itself, or in the actual organization, or the actual
just in the actual organization. Yeah.
Well, the biggest problem we have is actually attrition. And from the organizational point of view, people just get burnt out. People get tired. People come in with a lot of enthusiasm, and God bless them. I love their enthusiasm. I love the way that they say they're going to do something, and they follow through and they do it. But after 4 or 5 years of that, you can't. I can't expect anyone to love Arcanis as much as I do. I can't. I live, breathe, eat Arcanis 24/7. When I'm at work, obviously I think about work. But when I'm not at work, I'm thinking about the next story, what I have to write next and everything else. And I've lived in this world, and it's very comfortable for me. So the biggest problem that we've had is attrition of administration. We had a brilliant young man named Sean. He's not that young anymore. He's in his 40s, I'm sure. Sean Molly, who went on. He started being the campaign director for Living Arcanis back in the D20 days, and he did such a good job. Wizards of the Coast tagged him to run to be the director of their organized play for Forgotten Realms, right? So he moved on. He apologized and said, "Hey, this is an opportunity I've always wanted, and I'm not gonna. Who am I to stand in the way of anybody's dreams?" So off he went. So we had to scramble for others, and people have come and gone. That's been the biggest problem. The second biggest problem is that our players, whom I love, and they really are the reason why I do this. Sometimes I get a little miffed, a little upset that we're not putting on as many adventures as they would like.
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, life happens, and I can only do so much.
Mhm.
But we try our best, and for the most part, 90% of them are fine with it. They're fantastic people. Sometimes people get a little grumpy, and they start, and if I'm having a bad day, it's not a good email to get. So, but besides that, it's actually been an extremely rewarding. It actually has been a very rewarding experience. Not the least of because since we've been doing this for 20 years, and we do have a good amount of player retention, I have seen 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. Couples who met during play, got married, had kids, and those kids are now playing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That to me, when I see those kids, it warms my heart, And funny thing. So a couple years ago at Origins, one of these kids, one of these the sons of players of a couple, is there, and he's about 9 years old or 10 years old or whatever. And I usually go do my rounds. I go say hello to everybody and whatnot. And he stops and he goes, "You wrote this?" I go, "Yeah, I did." And he looks at me. He goes, huh. just a little. I'm like, okay, well, I'll take that as a good thing. But yeah, that's been the most rewarding thing. But as far as the worst thing, I really haven't had a really bad experience. It's been, like I said, attrition is nerve wracking because we have to fill in the gap. But overall, it has been, and finding, and of course the eternal issue, finding writers to write adventures. So if anybody's interested in writing adventures, please let me know. But it's a problem. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lucy.
Your comment about the first floor goes down differently in Europe than it does in the States, by the way. We were like, you must really dislike that beard because she made you jump out of a first floor window.
Oh.
Like here, we have a ground floor.
So
So
no, the joke is that she really likes it. She really likes it, and I don't. It's itchy. I don't know how you feel about it, Andy. And you. I'm sorry, we haven't been introduced. Hi, my name is
Andy.
Yeah,
Andy.
Oh, Andy, how are you?
It makes it easy.
It does.
But to me, it's like I can't wait to shave it off. But
Lady Phoenix says that the boy was 8 and he still loves the game.
Really? Well. Is Lady Phoenix a certain Elizabeth, or no?
I imagine so.
Okay. Well, hopefully it is.
And
anyway.
what Kilishandra asks, what one lesson do you have for someone thinking of running a living campaign, organized play for themselves for the very first time?
All right, I'm going to be serious about this. I could be flippant, but I'll be serious. If you're truly thinking about doing an organized play campaign, know what you're getting into. It is time consuming in a way that I don't think you'll understand until you're in it. It is, assuming that people like it. If nobody likes it, count yourself lucky because nobody's going to bother you. Nobody's going to contact you. But assuming you have something that people enjoy, people are going to want more. People are going to, by the same token, people are going to volunteer to help you, which is great. And you should be thankful for those people. But by the same token, it's a huge commitment that you'll be doing. Not just time, but effort. You need to keep things fresh. If your campaign is a long running campaign, you've got to keep things moving. You've got to keep things evolving. You can't, pull out the same horse and expect people to ride it again for the 10th time. So what I would say is know what you're getting into. Make sure that you have something that will give people a new experience, because the last thing you want is to have a situation where, and I was very scared about this, you're going to put out your baby for everybody to see, right? And up until then, only your handful of best friends have been playing it, but they're your best friends, right? Now you're about to put it out to the public, and nothing's worse than having people say, and that's soul crushing, right? Because that is something that you put your heart and soul into. So get people's opinion, playtest things, make sure that whatever system you decide to use, whatever it may be, make sure you and your GMs are conversant with it, are really good at it, are very comfortable with it, and at least you can't do it all by yourself. At least have 3 or 4 people you can count on to run things for you, that are on the same boat as you, that are as passionate, maybe not as passionate as you, but close, and that will want to see it through. Try not to plan too far ahead. Do a year, see how it goes, and then because life changes, life happens, and be ready to bail if you need to for your own health, because above all, this is just for fun. Okay, nobody is living and dying because of this. We're doing this for fun. We're doing this for enjoyment. We're doing it for companionship with people of our tribe, if you will, and everybody wants to have a good time. If at any point it does not become, it ceases being a good time, then you should seriously consider, especially if health is in the way, then you should seriously consider backing up by planning just a year in advance, and give it an ending, an ending that can move on to something else, but an ending. So if you do decide, hey, after 1 year, this is it, I can't do this anymore. This is a bunch of, I've given all I can, and I have to walk away. No one's going to say, well, I gave a year of my time and I'm at a cliffhanger. I don't know what happened, So at least you give them a nice little thing, a nice little bow to wrap everything up, and everybody walks away happy. Hey, it was a great experience for a year. Thank you very much. And you're welcome. That's it.
I remember. Oh, sorry, Andy, on you go.
I was just going to say, though, this is something that very few people in the world know, maybe 3.
Okay.
But I was going to be running a living campaign for Warhammer. And the bit that most people don't know is that the Ubersreich Adventures were originally set up for this. There's now 3 books of adventures that are set up for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the current edition.
Mm-hmm.
And they were originally designed with the idea of moving them into a full living campaign where the impacts of the choices that were made inside Ubersreich would affect just Ubersreich. One of the difficulties of playing inside somebody else's IP is that they've already got their own established stories. They've already got their own established beginnings, middles, and ends. So it was all about making sure that we could personalize the story and make the impact that we wanted from a living campaign hit the setting itself, while simultaneously respecting the IP that we were working inside. But yeah, the original setup for the Ubersreich campaigns was the Ubersreich Adventures was an ongoing set of adventures that all strung together to create overall story arcs. And we were going to be taking the individual groups run-throughs of that and using those to decide the next step. So it's been super fascinating to hear how Henry has done it, because much of what he has suggested is loosely what we were thinking of doing, while simultaneously I had a constant fear of the thing that he just said, that it would be this enormous time sink, and I was afraid of that as a potential, particularly given that we had so very few staff that were working on it at that particular point. So in the end, we dialed back and we just went for a slightly different version of it. But we had all the documents set up in the background for it. We were that close. We were probably going to run it through Google, Google Docs for not the Google Docs themselves, but they've got sheets there that you can use to do surveys, and we're going to be using those so people could just input their results directly into that. I'm loving the hard points and the soft points because we didn't break them up like that, and I think that's a really nice way of doing it. And I wish I'd known that at the time because I would have pitched things differently. Oh, I love that.
Presumably it was important for it to be contained, because I remember in a slightly different medium of tabletop battle games rather than role-playing games, Games Workshop had the Storm of Chaos, which was an organized play campaign where it didn't go exactly as they thought that it would go, and as the results came in, Chaos just kept on losing and kept on losing, and that had quite major ramifications for them because they'd committed to changing the setting based on, and so what second edition Wifrit itself then had a really, like, the post Storm of Chaos that was very much not what they had originally intended it to be.
Yeah, and I suppose that's because they had a less well-defined sort of set of parameters of what the influence was from what Henry was saying. You know, did very clear sense of did this happen, did this happen, did this happen. There it was just who's winning, and you know,
Chaos was not
exactly if you've got more people playing one particular set of armies, or if your rules are perhaps not as well balanced as they could be. That's yeah.
Yeah, there's always the threat that things can go, you know, sideways. But I think that's kind of cool, though, from a campaign director point of view, and even as a writer. I like to think that role playing game is about thinking on your feet, right? If you're GMing a role playing game, you're constantly thinking on your feet. Yeah, you have a roadmap. Yeah, you know more or less where it's going. You know this guy's going to be here, and that guy's going to be behind the bar, and this guy's waiting in ambush. But you know you have to be always thinking on your feet. And this is like on the macro scale, right? Now they're affecting how you write future product and whatnot. And one last thing, just real quick, before I forget about this, Kilashandra's question. One other thing you need to learn is that every, and at least this has been my experience, every living campaign adventure has to be written so that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end in a 4-hour window.
Yeah,
maybe 5 if you're lucky, you know, because you want this to be run at conventions. You want other people to be exposed to this, so you've got to play by the convention rules, and their convention rules are usually 4, maybe, like I said, maybe 5 hours at the outset. The only thing that the only time we break that rule is for a Battle Interactives, which is a 2-slot event, so it's an 8-hour event. But everything else, and let me tell you, it's not that easy to run an adventure that has a beginning, middle, and satisfying end in 4 hours. That's a skill. that must be cultivated. So yeah, sorry to punch that.
Seagoat says, from my experience with organized play, knowing the rules of the game as GM is critical, especially as you may have a variety of players each week.
Agreed. That's very, very true.
And then I've played war game living campaigns where the impact of players' games across the world changed the background of the system. Yeah, I just imagine there was like some orc players and some undead players just like tag teaming it, like, humans, step back. It's our turn to put the boot into chaos. Right, let's have a look. So let's go back to this one. Oh, no, in fact, let's look at Infinite Saxon's question first. So how do you handle creative narrative differences between GMs and shared campaigns?
Well, if I understand your question properly, you're asking about how the table is run, not how the adventures are written. So let's start.
Yeah,
that's our baseline. Okay, all right. Most people are actually very, very good. When we tell our GMs that they have the ability to improvise, that they have the ability to change within reason, obviously, because one of the biggest draws to Arcanis is that it's a mystery, not just to the players, but to the GMs as well. The GMs are unraveling or peeling back the onion and finding different layers and different layers and different layers. You know, I have things that I wrote 20 years ago that are only now finally coming to fruition. And I did that because I wanted our GM, it's a reward for our GMs. In the beginning, we didn't have money. We weren't able to publish T-shirts, although we eventually did have a T-shirt that said, actions have consequences. or no, I'm sorry, that wasn't it. What was it? Oh, stupidity leads to character creation. That was it. And that was our best-selling T-shirt. We ran out like this at the right time. But we wanted people to have leeway, right? Because as the previous question alluded to, not every table is created equally. Sometimes you can have tables where they are not min-maxed, to the max, if you pardon the pun, that are not combat monsters, that they're diplomats and people who are more about not fighting your way through something, but talking their way through something, right? And since it is an organized play campaign, you never know who's going to show up at your table. You and your buddies may come up and you're a tight-knit group of 6, but one year somebody's sick, somebody can't get a day off, something happens, and now you're down to 5 or you're down to 4, so you get 2 people who are completely random. So you have no idea what's going to happen. So we give our GMs the power to change the combat, if you will, to downplay it a little bit. They also have the power that if they see that their players are having a grand old time role playing, let them role play. Sit back, relax, let them have a good time. Don't feel they need to push the thing forward. Every once in a while, I'll say, "Hey, remember we only got 4 hours and we're just on scene 1." But if they're having a good time, at the end of the day, that's all it's all about. Where we want to have a good time. And to the credit, believe it or not, I have seen philosophical and religious arguments in character at a table, and it is the most amazing thing to see. And I always tell the guy, no, relax, but they're not getting here. It's okay. Let them have fun. Everybody's having a good time. Let them have fun. So I have had once or twice had a person who started to inject their own ideas as to why things were in Arcanis. And then it will get players come back and say, I just saw this and this happened here, but you said over here and that contradicts. I went, and I'm thinking to myself, I wrote that. That didn't happen. I didn't write that. And I've had to backpedal, on hey, I'm very sorry, because it's all about the experience, right? Yeah. We want everybody to have an experience, and we want everybody to have a common experience, because there is nothing more fun than after a table, after a slot, sitting down with your friends who are at other tables and say, hey, this happened to me. Oh, that happened to me. And telling these war stories. And people just love to do that. To this day, they're talking about stuff that happened 20 years ago. And people enjoy that. And if you start injecting your own, I don't want to say narrative, but like, for example, we had at one point, I don't remember the whole story, but somehow these feline tigers became the reincarnated souls of something. I'm like, I didn't write that. That never happened. That's not the way Arcanis works. And it was a person who was jamming for us that for whatever reason they decided to do that. Whatever. So we had to backtrack there. So when it comes to creative and narrative differences, when it comes to the actual story point, yeah, I'm pretty cut and dry. I mean, we want everybody to have a good time. We want everybody to have the experience. We tell you up front, these are the things that you have leeway in, which is a lot, But when it comes to the actual story, please don't start, saying this is this and X is Y and Z is A, because it's not, or it may not be, So at that point, I usually get feedback like this really fast. I have an open door policy for my players. Everybody has my email. I'm very accessible at conventions, and they let me know. And then I either smile and go, well, yeah, that happened. I wonder why, kind of thing. Or that one time I had to backtrack, and luckily it's only been one time.
And that's Lord not bad for over 20 years. 20 I've only had to backtrack once. That's good. Yeah.
Lord Frill says, I played the hell out of the 3.5 Living Arcanis era. My fondest memories are the battle interactives. One year I made a physical banner for some sea zombie faction the group was fighting.
Oh,
actually, I wouldn't mind knowing a bit more about the battle parts, because that's quite different to everything else you've described.
Right, absolutely. So, battle interactives, as the the title implies, is very, very, very combat heavy, extremely combat heavy. Although we do have points where diplomacy can be injected. Okay, so for example, we have. Let me think back. All right, the last one we just had for Arcanis Con, we had a battle interactive where a faction was attacking another faction, nations, and the players were sent in to evacuate a city. They had to organize because they were being overrun. I'm being vague because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't played it. That's why I would love to tell you, hey, this person attacked this person, but yeah, I'm doing it for that because I hate spoilers. So they were sent in to, basically organize the evacuation, and along the way, obviously, there were stories that occurred. They were teleported in, which is a weird thing in Arcanis because we don't teleport. But everybody was disoriented. They were spread out across the cityscape, and I wrote 10 different things that could occur. So a GM at a table could pick one at random, and that's what happened based upon what they think their players would enjoy. And then it would go on and on. The nice thing about the battle interactives is you will fight overwhelming odds, and at the end of every round or every scene, we tally up. We take a 15-minute break and we tally up what occurred. If the majority of the player tables succeeded in their objective, because they all have objectives and they're all told what your objective is, you have to evacuate, the majority. There's 30, let's say there's 30 people here. You've got to evacuate at least 16 off the edge of the map before time is called. And they're always 45 minutes. So basically every round is an hour, 45 minutes plus a 15-minute break. Then if the majority of the players did that, great. The next one, either it's a little bit easier or something else happens. If they failed, then it becomes more difficult. We had a group, a table, which they play Saracen, which are these lizardmen kind of player characters that we have, and they call themselves Beast, and that's their table. They've been playing for years and years and years, and at one point they got left behind enemy lines, and they thought they were done, and we had to create a special mission just for them on the fly of them trying to work their way back through enemy lines to the main line where the rest of the player characters were. Now, the great thing about BIs, which I should mention, is that when you're playing D&D or any game, every table is its own little pocket dimension, right? Mm-hmm. One table does not affect what another table does. However, in a BI, that changes. Every table is a squad, if you will, of an army. There are certain BIs where we allow tables who are having a rough time to ask for aid from players that are having an easier time. And we've actually had players either swap, or we've had 7-man tables. We've had 8-man tables because 2 other players joined the 6 just to help them out. And it's a fun time. So this gentleman, I'm assuming, or gentleman or lady, you said Lord, so I'm assuming he's a gentleman. This gentleman is referencing a D20 era battle interactive, which the name escapes me, but it was a fantastic thing. There's a story in the history of Arcanis where there was the Coriani Legion. Think Roman legions, the Coriani legions, that their boats were destroyed by magic and they sank, and everybody in their armor, they all, they were about to land, but before they got too close, they were destroyed, so they sank, they drowned, blah, blah, blah. 40, 50 years later, they were raised as undead. And so you have these undead legionnaires walking up on shore. And that was their battle standard that this gentleman created, which was fantastic. People really get into it. During the Coriani Civil War, I made the horrible mistake of allowing players to choose whether they were loyalists or rebels. And it was horrible because that means that every adventure I had to write an intro. If you're a loyalist, this happens, or this gets you in. If you're a rebel, this is your hook, and modify each adventure. It's almost like writing 2 adventures. Mm-hmm. At one of the battle interactives, there was a group called the Legio Lex Talionis. Okay, the Inquisitor's Legions, and they everybody was sitting down with the exception of them, and they asked for permission ahead of time, and they all walked in Legion formation with a banner for Legio Lectalianos that they made themselves, and they marched across or around the entire room. This was at Gen Con back when they were very generous with the rooms. We had this enormous ballroom. There must have been 30 tables, packed with players. And these guys they were getting applauded, or they were getting, the loyalists were applauding them. Obviously, the rebels were booing them. It was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. So,
says
I'm sorry.
He remembers those guys. He ran their table.
Oh, there you go.
So there's some links in the comments for people who've been asking for links, because people have really appreciated your stories, Henry, as have we. I think I speak for all three of us when I say we've been very excited. It's brought back lots of memories for you, Andy Law, I think, of your younger days when you ran numbers of groups, but you never made it to a living campaign.
Not a full living campaign. No, I used to run with multiple GMs because I ran a club with 100 members, and we used to all work together in the same campaigns with everybody playing in it. So it sounds like quite a similar experience, while simultaneously not being the same, because that was way before there was an internet or anything like that. But the only way that we could all get together was to physically get together. Yeah.
Well, allow me to invite all of you and everybody listening or watching. Please join our campaign. We'd love to have you. We're a friendly bunch.
Lord Phil said they would always delay their initiative, so they always went into the exact same initiative order. We sit in initiative order. We sit round the table in initiative order, but there's some vying for spaces, so ours does change. Anyway, that's us. We've reached 8 o'clock. That was
already. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Henry.
Oh,
We'd love to have you on again. We'd love to talk more. It was really interesting to hear all your stories, and hopefully we'll be able to meet you. Well, Andy Law has met you one day. We've met Henry, but the other Andy and I have never met you in person. Hopefully we'll be able to one day.
It would be my pleasure. Can I just make one little pitch?
Of course you can. Go for it.
So real quick, we have Psionics plays a very important part of Arcanis. It's not an afterthought. It's actually integral to the campaign. 5e didn't have our Psionics rules, so we made our own. So this little bad boy, the Codex of the Mind, as you can see there, 256 pages, full color, with a comprehensive psionic rule. This will be arriving on our shores right around Valentine's Day, if I believe. Backers will get it first, obviously, because this was kickstarted. And then afterwards it goes through the chain, and you'll be more than... I would love for you to pick one up if you're interested. I believe over on your side of the world is Devium is the distributorship that carries
Devium.
Them.
Yep.
So they will be carrying this as well. So we're very proud of this book. It was a heck of a lot of work, but I think it came out beautifully. I hope if you guys see it, I hope you do too. And if you like Andy's maps, the Blessed Lands campaign setting, Codex Geographica Volume 1, that's where that beautiful map is. It's right here.
And they are super high quality, awesome books, by the way. Just as a small aside, I might have one or two of them sitting over there.
We've got the PDF link, but we'll share all the links on socials again after Henry and on Discord and everything, so people have got them to hand to go and check them out. And so that's us for this week. Next week we have
Jonathan Green. Jonathan Green
is joining us to talk about his current Kickstarter, which is going on just now and is on until I think it will still be on next week, and we'll be finishing in February. I'm just looking for the
not
details
quite.
So
he's coming on to discuss converting classic stories into modern RPGs. Because he's done this multiple times. He's written over 70 books, ranging from fighting fantasy books to various novels for various folks over the course of time. And he's updated quite a few games into game books and into RPGs. So classic settings brought up to date into new game books. So that's going to be quite a fascinating topic to chat about, I think.
Very cool.
But we will be asking him about his Kickstarter while he is here.
Well, obs.
Brilliant. Well, until next week, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, as always, to our patrons for enabling the stream to happen. Thanks to everyone on the Discord community. And thanks to all our viewers. Until next time, all that remains for me to say is good night and caw-caw. See you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.